There's shower, and this time shower. Here's the pop-up again, right? New word. Shower is not a new word, technically speaking. Now, do someone who is non-intellectual, it's not a good or a bad thing, non-intellectual, an intuitive learner, a gamified person who's not motivated to have meta-level subtextual understanding. This is technically not a new word, and technically a new word, since shawa was attached to o abimasu. So o abimasu, shawa o abimasu was a very specific use case for showering or to take a bath or etc. In this case, shawa now is a new word because it is being used as a literal object, which then you can have a shower with the ga particle. So is that all explained here? No. And yet, it's funny because if you could explain that to me, what I just said, I would be more confident in that you are comprehending Japanese on a deeper level than simply playing a game and looking for a pattern. Is that desirable or reasonable for a learning program? That is subjective. In my opinion, I enjoy it. And in my opinion, I think this will fall short of an educational program for most people. And adding a tooltip or something where you highlight over a new word. So every time they use this like hint system, it's called a hint system in video games where they highlight something, the infamous yellow paint, right? In video games, the infamous yellow paint or the star trail, right? This is gamified 101 right here. It's supposed to alarm you to, hey, did you figure this out? And usually video games later go to explain the mechanic if you didn't figure out the mechanic. And what most gamers who don't intuitively or intellectually, ideally intellectually understand this, they brute force it. So they find the right answer and continue to use the right answer until it's up to the game to decide to explain it to them or not. And you still can beat games without understanding the intellectual side. You can mechanically beat games without ever understanding its underlying principles. For example, when someone finishes a JRPG game, they do not understand the multiplicative and complex mathematics that deal with how their statistics and their attributes interact with outcomes in their mechanics, right? Someone is not talking about how poison is on a diminished percentage decline return for each turn pass proportional to like the enemy's light HP bar. That's not interesting. This is one of the pros and cons of gamifying language learning or learning something. It's not comprehensive. It's not meant to be comprehensive. What makes this a draw is the idea that if it was comprehensive, like in your face, it will slow things down even more. And if you don't slow down already, if someone is using this and they're like, yeah, new word, but it's not really a new word, it's kind of an old word, so I already know it, move along. If you're a person that's already doing that, adding a tooltip functionally will get skipped. So, in my opinion, having the ashram is nice. As a business, using a tool that's likely not going to show up because of the target audience you have, that's a room for contention. Now, there is, in my opinion, probably clever ways you can make a sparkly new word and try to encourage the person to click on it. Generally, in my opinion, if you want to keep the gamified approach, introduce a new mechanic, right? Incentivize clicking on the tooltip or incentivize somehow why this is new and interesting. To me, when something's off and something's new, even the minor details are incredibly interesting to me. That's largely why my learning and my playing video games take like 3 times the amount of time that maybe someone else who's not emotionally invested is taking. Like, oh yeah, I sped run through Duolingo. It's like, congrats. Like, that's still a thing when someone says like, oh yeah, I sped through in 40 hours. I completed chapter. Great. And whatever satisfies you, you are also trading off certain things, like stopping and breathing and understanding how you're achieving things, right? And this is one of them. Do you want the yellow paint? Well, in video games, the answer is no. People don't like yellow paint anymore. As in, hey, I don't need to be told what is new. I can see it. If I don't see it, then I'm a pega. Well, this is one of those use cases. How do you learn in natural language? You either continue to fail or get reminded by another source that you're failing, right? You get a response. In this case, there's no response. You either see that it's different or you don't. And then when you see it's different, you get to choose if you want to explain it to yourself or not. So my journey down Duolingo has become exponentially more interesting because, ironically, since they don't explain it, I go and seek an explainer for this. But in this case, I have enough now outside knowledge that I know that shawa is an object. It is a subject object marked by ga this time. It is not something that's marked by o and associated with showering or to take a shower or obimasu, right? Or abimasu. So this is a new word now. It's technically a new thing. And none of that is explained, of course, to the chagrin of linguists and professional people, right? And then in terms of the gamified community, this is good. This is excellent for people who hate, like, the thing that makes Duolingo popular is also the thing that literally professional linguists and educators would dislike. However, professional educators and linguists are not concerned with how consistent and curious people who like to play games are. They are concerned with how much information they can jam into someone. So while you have that kid unengaged and step out and put you on mute in an online course, this type of streamlined design gives the person the option. They either brute force through it, through pattern recognition, or trial and error through it, and then just remember the trial and error, or voluntarily decide, hey, this is a new word. I need to learn more about it. That inherent type of design increases retention because of streamlining and decrease the consistency of getting more information. When people play intuitive games, they ultimately choose to learn less and feel more and repeat more. So when someone says, oh yeah, Duolingo should slam you with more grammar points and stuff, Duolingo is also in the... I don't want to make it sound like, oh yeah, but it's a business. That's a business move. It's like, well, retention is exchanged for inundation. So if you walk into a class, why do kids feel like class is boring a lot of times? There's too much information and too much FYIs, right? You are engaging them less by disseminating more at a rapid rate. So oftentimes this is what Duo has to balance. It's popular because it does these type of streamlined approaches. Is it for me? I'm naturally inquisitive. So I like looking up these things on my own time. I can totally understand that if I introduce Duo to a group of kids, this is the design that will capture them far more than me writing a gigantic blip up here about why this word is new from the last time they used. I used to look up Lotus. You used to look up every highlighted word because Duo didn't give me all the context I wanted for the word, such as part of speech. Yeah. So this is what I mean by, can you have both? Kind of. The thing is, let's step back a little. Can you have not just both, but a win-win situation? So here's my thought about that. You need programmers, you need people to fact check, you need to do all the things in order to get that functionality, right? How much return in investment are you getting from your target audience when you add those things? I would reckon it's far less than professional linguists and learners would suggest. It's kind of like go into a class, you're a professor, you're a linguist, right? I guess I'm gonna use it from the context of preparing a laboratory, a lab assignment for biochemistry. I walk into a lab and I have this incredibly detailed lab manual, right? I worked hard on it. I made it comprehensive. I give it to my students. They will look at 10% of it. They will look at what they have to do to get their grades. That's it. So if you're thinking from the perspective of now, if you represent a multi-billion-dollar effort orchestrating and hiring people to do certain tasks, how do you balance all the resources you need and still maintain a net positive return on investment? Yeah, absolutely see what I'm saying. Giving information isn't learning. Engaging the mind is the right way. Yeah, and it is in art. And what I'm saying is, it is possible. If they, since this is a gamified thing, have a new word mechanic, right? Like, oh, when you enter a new word or get reminders, have to introduce some sort of mechanic to it, like abstraction mechanic, like it's a new word time. Now we're gonna do a new word segment or a new grammar segment, right? And it's gonna take time to develop that stuff. I actually think it will take time to, quite a different departure from this. So I don't know, Duo is working on some of these things, but generally speaking, there are so many times when I step into help someone, like teach assist a lab, and that lab professor, right, the person who's in charge of the lab, they hand me this gigantic Bible of a lab manual. I'm in heaven. Like, that's so awesome that this person like basically prepared me for everything that I need to know. Like, what if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? And that's awesome. And I take that lab manual, and guess what I have to do in the beginning of the lab? I have to streamline it and distill it down so that if they read the lab manual, they'll understand the lab manual enough and not just brush off all the hard work of that professor. So that's what Duo is doing, right? I am the TA, and I have to somehow make it engaging to digest this incredible piece of work that had many, many years of refinement. But you can't just walk into a TED Talk and give a like postgraduate doctoral level communication to explain the topic, because you're gonna lose your audience. So it's this that these designs happen. Can they do a better compromise? Sure, definitely. Will it take time? Absolutely. Why does it take time? Because when you're a professional linguist and you're a professional special anything, you're not focused on the act of teaching someone who's uneducated, your focus is to give them the most comprehensive knowledge they have. That's not the same, in my opinion, as engaging someone and encouraging them to learn. It's making sure they get all the information, and that's fair. That's like a politician telling you all the intricacies of the political system without sounding provocative and I do kind of deceptive too. So there's a filter, and that filter is the balance that we're constantly struggling with when it comes to learning. Not to simplify things too much, but find a different way of explaining complex topics and subjects without necessarily losing your audience. And I think that's where formal education has not kept up with trends, right? Formal education can't move at a pace that is as fast as like the internet culture. The way people learn constantly continues to shift quite dramatically, and it takes an institution does not move that fast. I mean, it takes someone 40 plus years to become a true expert in a subject, but it takes a fraction of that time for learning and engagement shifts in generational gaps. Like less than 13 years, there will be a new generation of young people, and another 13 years, there will be a new generation of older people that spawned from the, that aged into a new gap, and their learning methods and engagement flexes and changes with the trends. And institutionally, that's an uphill battle. It's always constantly an uphill battle. So why does it feel like everyone criticizes Duo? Because Duo is trying to move at that pace. Is it possible? I hope it is for them. I hope it is for like AI generation or something that keeps up with the time. In my opinion, most of the criticism of Duolingo is guilty of the very same thing, where their advice is archaic. It is passé, it's old school, and honestly, in my opinion, does not resonate with non-intuitive people or non-intellectual people. Like, I like to say that I am somewhat intellectually inclined and I have a natural curiosity for these things. That doesn't mean everyone else is, or a big majority of people are naturally intuitive. Like, if you learned your third or fourth language, you're like, oh yeah, language learning is awesome. I did this and this and this. And then you're talking to a bunch of people who like, I want to learn my second language. And then you're telling them how exciting things are, and they can't relate to you. They legitimately can't relate to you yet because they haven't done it. So you have to get off your ego horse and stop ego teaching and get back down to earth, where you're focused on things like, what was it like? What was it like to learn a second language as opposed to a fourth or a fifth? You can be so passionate and exude as much eccentricity as you can for language learning. The first thing someone is thinking when they're learning a second language is, how long is it going to take? And am I going to enjoy learning this, or am I going to be frustrated? And you address that nowhere. All you have is "trust me, bro" slapped across your face and say, I know how to do it right. And that other person's like, well, I don't agree with you. And they walk away. And then they don't learn a second language. So you kind of just fail your objective in the first, right from the beginning. Have I seen Duo blogs? I have. Yes, I have. I've seen a lot of anti-Duo blogs, op-eds, linguists. Like, I read every evening about the current situation. I like being aware of the community around a product. And I choose very popular products because there are lots of people then. There are a lot of micro communities. Yeah, the official blog. Yeah. I did read a lot of the official blog. Actually, the reason why I read the official blog is also to validate all the claims. Like, you know, the official blog explains a lot of certain things, like their motivations, their philosophies, like things that deal with trying to communicate their design. Like, I was looking in their official blogs for like design cues, like, oh, what is their philosophy behind making mistakes and all that stuff. I liked it. I actually quite like a lot of their takes. They're different takes though, and it's kind of I think almost pedantic when other criticizers or critics would say, oh, they're not doing this. It's because they're not. So it's kind of like, oh man, I hate water. It's wet. Like, well, that's not constructive at all. Oh, I hate Duolingo for what it doesn't do. So I'm going to give you a product that does what Duolingo doesn't do. However, when you look at that product, it doesn't do what Duolingo does either. So what I mean is, they offer products that isn't Duolingo, as opposed to they offer products that is Duolingo and more. So not only is it not constructive, in my opinion, it's destructive. It doesn't suggest that use both. Rarely in those discussions, I think more than 50% of critics, rarely is it use both. Use all of the above. Find a combination that works for you. It's often don't use this. Use this. And to me, it feels like just another business person offering a business take and criticizing. It's the pot calling the kettle black. And for me, I needed to find out in the official Duo blogs, do they actually give those impressions? Like, do they go out of their way and say, don't use Babbel, use our product. It's better than Babbel. Don't use these influencer tools. Use our tool because our tool replaces them. That is the mentality that I feel is a double standard, in my opinion. And it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. And that it echoes the sentiment that I made yesterday. If you need to put down another product or another service made by another person in order to elevate your position, that's not meritocracy. That's defamation, not meritocracy. There's no merit. You're elevating your position by shoving someone else's down. That's, in my opinion, you have my pity, but hopefully people around you don't treat you the same way. Where, hey, oh, your product sucks, therefore my product is better. Not, how is my product better? And you can still continue using that product, but I want to convince you my product is better based on what it does. Instead, most of the peddlers, business people who said they're interested, like for example, this is kind of going to be a hot take, but those people who say, oh, I care about you, so let me tell you of all the products you should avoid and use mine. Not only does not it explain why their product cares about the person they're talking to, all they did was divert and slander the competitor. Sounds like a politician. I know. Sounds like, and what I mean by that is the stereotype of a politician. There are I honestly think there are encouraging politicians who focus on what they offer to contrast and compare to others, as opposed to slandering and, defamation techniques to push their opponent down because they don't want to focus on what they have to offer. That's a sign, in my opinion, that's a show of weakness, where, oh, you can't even express and highlight what you do well, and what you don't do well, by the way. That's also a thing. It's a business ploy. When you only focus on things you do well, instead of focusing on things you decided to do and what they can't do, as in what they trade off. So, in my opinion, in the official Duo blogs, I was looking for things that the way they say it. Like, oh, I know our products focus on perfection, as in like focus on the correct answer, and we are trying to include other responses that are correct. Sorry if there are so many prompts in automation, there might be a chance that certain correct combinations occur and we miss them. That is the trade-off of being comprehensive with combinatorial automatically generated prompts, right? Those are the ways that, in my opinion, skirt and bridge being competent about all the hurdles, the pros and cons of what you do. So when I say I prefer to make my mistakes, so I prefer to make a mistake, and either I make it frequently enough to encourage myself to figure out what the mistake is, or by a certain amount of mistakes, someone or some system comes in and inform me, hey, we noticed you made this very statistically highly likely mistake. Can we offer you something, right? That is acknowledging the shortcomings and also the pros of an approach. So many times, in my opinion, I would say 80 to 90% of the things that I read online when people review is they always focus on what is positive about their own opinions and positivity and like product that they're single-handedly peddling, and only citing negative things that are compared to the product that they offer in the negative sense. Like, hey, my product has better nutrient and have better protein content than this competing product. And that's it. This product has less protein. My product has more protein. Buy my product. What else does it not do? What else does it do? What else is different? That is not germane to the topic. It's streamlined like this, right? It's streamlined for explainer's sake. It doesn't tell you that, oh yeah, this product has more sugar than that other product. It has more protein, but it also has more sugar. Oh, it doesn't say what this product tastes like. Maybe this taste is not as appealing to that one. My product has a sweeter taste. That product tastes salty. So many things like that. And the evaluation, the hustle culture, in my opinion, of the internet bleeds and does not exclude evaluating learning products. So learning products does not escape the grasp of the internet. And now it's kind of disheartening to me. When I read this stuff, it's really disheartening. Generally speaking, learning products have been synergistic for most of my life. Like when formal education is out, they're usually encouraging competition in order to better the whole, as opposed to discouraging competition. So I would love to see what other professional linguists feel about how the internet, the people who take to the internet, criticize learning products. Learning products, it would be, in my sense, in an academic setting, you want to say, Duo is doing all these things. Can we actually do these things with our product too? As on top of that. And then go to Duo and say, hey, guys, we also have your type of thing, and it was very inspirational, but we do also these things. Can you integrate that stuff into your program as well? And we can work together, right? And elevate learning so that regardless if you use Duo or Anki, those consistencies go up. So then you don't have competition like the heckin' internet culture where you're saying, oh, Anki is better than this. Babbel is better than that. Like they're fighting each other. And it makes learning feel like a business all the time, even for like professional people. When a linguist comes up, it just constantly feels like they're trying to sell me something. They're trying to sell me advice that I didn't ask for. and they're trying to sell me their point of view, as opposed to sounding like the scientific community or the idealized scientific community, where yes, you have rivalries and competition, but you don't want your competition to suffer. If they suffer and disappear, you suck more. You stop trying. You stop making better products. To me, I always thought in a naive world that learning is a different industry that doesn't lead to destructive criticism. I mean, go for video games, movies, books, sure. I guess that's your liberty, right? Learning just felt like it has been a place where people encourage each other. But man, having a popular learning product, I can't even... The people at Duolingo have my sympathies, in my opinion. They're fighting an uphill battle of trying to not be marked as a business conglomerate versus someone who wants to popularize learning. Like, in my opinion, my naive world is that I feel the people who make Babbel, the people who make Bushu, Anki, all those people sit in a UN, a United Nations of learning, and they collaboratively exchange ideas, all for the benefit of making all their products successful. As in, it's not going to be what each program does and doesn't do, but more like, what's your favorite program? As in, which program helped you learn faster, even though all of them are comprehensive and fast, so that it's a healthy competition. Like when someone says, oh yeah, Anki does this, I should go to Duo and ask them, are they going to use something like this? And Duo would be like, oh yeah, we have thought about that. We kept track of what Anki is doing, instead of trying to differentiate from each other. That's a business thing that they have to balance, right? They have no guarantees that if they do exactly what Anki does, this is a business in the end. If Duo begin to do what Anki does, the person, right? The customer is still going to choose one of them. They're not going to use both. So the more their product overlaps, the more they're discouraged to do the same thing. And that's what happened to learning. Like these learning programs, that's how I feel about reading official Duo blogs, how they have to manage and moderate things on the subreddits. Like the Reddit system in general destroyed collaborative learning. And that's kind of sad, in my opinion. It's so sad when teachers go at each other's throats because they have a disagreement of principle. This is just, in my opinion, this is a larger scale of people disagreeing with how to learn. It's sad because now the people who are learning reflect this toxicity in what is the best way to learn, as opposed to how we get people educated. So they're fighting over, like, even the people who have learned things are spending more time fighting over how to get someone to learn versus how to just get them to learn. Like, you know, like throw everything at them, make them learn. Like, that's the idea. The baseline is you want them to learn, not who has the better learning method. That's kind of disparaging. I don't care how long it takes you. I don't care how efficient your technique is. Can you get someone to learn and be happy about it and not be attacked because they didn't learn the fastest way? It's one of those things like having a competition for happiness. Like, oh yeah, you can get happier with my product at a faster rate than getting happier with their product. Their product, yeah, they can get you happy, but it's not as good. It makes you sad because you're not getting happiness quicker. Come here. Like, that's how I feel about it. I think learning is a life skill. It's almost as essential as happiness. So how do we treat happiness? Well, you do whatever is possible to get happy. Everyone's selling happiness. They're selling life hacks. They're selling that stuff, right? And they don't attack someone else's route to happiness. Not as much. But learning somehow. Duo is super popular. Babbel is super popular. And now learning has become this toxic extrinsic business model that is reinforced by professionals who claim they care about learning. Well, when you claim you care about learning, you stop thinking what is the best tools and what is the most appropriate tools. You don't shun tools because they're not appropriate for you and your principles. Shelve your ego and ask the person and try to characterize the person you're talking to and find the appropriate tools. I know some experts could say, like me, I suppose, I do know a thing or two. I would say, sorry, I don't have enough time to evaluate Babbel or Anki at the moment, or LingQ. I don't have enough time to comprehensively represent that. What I can tell you is what Duo offers and it doesn't offer, like what things Duo does well and doesn't do well. And hopefully you have someone like me, I suppose, with similar things you can compare to, who have used LingQ instead of Duo, and then you can compare the results. Like, okay, so I will only use Duo for vocabulary, right? I will only use Duo for vocabulary, and then I'll use Anki for something else, and then I'll use LingQ for conversation. This enables the person to learn their best way. It challenges them to use all the tools. Instead, someone goes around and say, don't use Duo. Well, you might have just removed their only way of consistently learn vocabulary. You don't know that. You basically remove the tool. The idea is to give all the tools, highlight what all the tools do, and then let the person decide which tool you'll use for the appropriateness. Like, for example, if you're trying to cut down a tree, and then someone's like, oh yeah, we don't cut trees, so ignore cutting trees. Our product is very good at chopping smaller wood. So if you're chopping smaller wood, come to us. But they don't tell you that, oh yeah, you can't use that same chopping tool for cutting down a whole tree. That's another product that we shunned because they're not good. They're good at that, but that's not the point. So I keep hearing this heckin' argument about like LingQ. Oh yeah, they got conversations and that's the way to learn. It's like, well, yeah, they have conversations. What do they don't have? They don't reinforce vocabulary in repetitious, slow way like Duo does. It's like this whole catch-all. Everyone's looking for the perfect tool, but it's not the perfect tool. There aren't perfect tools. Come on. If there was a perfect tool, whoever owns that perfect tool will own the world. It hasn't happened yet, folks. It hasn't happened. Just look at human history. I don't think there's a tool that basically adapted to time and trends. We would still be using it now. Do I speak Chinese? Yes. I'm gonna say yes. I speak Chinese. I can't read Chinese though. And I can't speak it on command. Just like I can't speak it on command in any language. I need a topic. Maybe sometimes I can say something in Chinese that's related to that. And also might not be the Chinese you're thinking of. Hugh. What about Anki for repetition? Again, Anki is a great way to do repetitious flashcarding. If you learn by investing in visual sense, you can do that. I'm not sure if Anki stores voice samples. So here's another thing you could do. I don't know if Anki does this, where they allow their flashcards to store the voice sample. Oh, it does? Then you can use all of it for repetition. No, I mean store voice samples, not have voice samples. So what I mean by that is you can pick, oh wait, you probably can too. You can pick from anywhere, right? And then load it into Anki. So like you could even say the word to yourself, record it on a mic, and then you can load that voice sample. Yeah, so you can use it for repetition. Yeah. That means Anki. So Anki, here's, if you want to, if you're asking like what are the pros and cons of Anki, one of the things is Anki is only as strong as its community base. So if you like Anki's community base, start with understanding how Anki's community base works. If you don't want to communicate and do that, ask yourself if you can produce all that stuff. If you can produce all that stuff, then Anki is fantastic. Because Anki is not forcing you to do those things. Remember that what Duo is doing for repetition is it's forcing you to do those things. Anki is not. It's not forcing you to download community things to get all that stuff you want. Someone asked me about Anki, like how to make it useful. Why would you download something you already know? If you're not forced and curious about how other people remember things on Anki, like how their flashcards look like, or things you know, and then you're not interested in downloading things you don't know yet from Anki, then those are all voluntary things. Nothing is forcing you in Anki to tell you, like Anki is not telling you, hey, did you add a voice to your flashcard? Hey, did you record yourself and add a voice to your flashcard? Hey, we also noticed that all of these people add pictures. Did you add a picture to your Anki voice to your flashcards? So Duo is doing that. They are taking a stance and telling you their methods. Anki is not telling you their methods. The community is. So just like the community, it can be overwhelming, it can be confusing, it can be mixed, right? People can have different opinions, and you have to put in the work. Something is not telling you how to put in the work. So Anki is great for non-beginners. You see, like this is the natural compromise. All the things that people say that Duo does leads to Anki, because Anki is customizable. It's for people. It's Linux. When you use Windows enough, you may, if you're really interested in Windows OS, eventually it'll lead you to Linux. So it's more flexible, more customizable, because you're already self-sufficient. As in, you are self-motivated, self-curious, you know all the things you need to include in a flashcard. Ask someone who never made a flashcard, who never used memory tools like a flashcard, don't know that memory is based on speech, hearing, like integrating all your stuff. It's based on imagery, association. Then you tell them, hey, use Anki. They will wet the bed, in my opinion. They will be so slow that it's better to just throw them on Duolingo for a bit to give them ideas on how to establish memory. If someone hasn't learned anything for a really long time, they'll be like, where do I start? What do I even put on a flashcard to remind myself? An 18-year-old who never learned anymore, their first idea is put a word on there, put the definition, put the translation, and maybe an image. And that's all it goes. That's as far as it goes. What does that do? That's a pathetic, low surface level use of your time. If that's what an expert would say, right? Like the ones that's focused on performance and efficiency, they would say, oh yeah, you're not utilizing all of that. It's like, well, Anki is not responsible for telling the people how to do that. At least Duo makes an attempt to say, hey, you have to repeat and you have to translate this stuff, and then you have to hear this stuff. And yeah, oh yeah, we'll try to put a reminder to encourage you to speak out loud, right? All this stuff is prescribed to you. So when something is prescribed to you, it's easy to criticize. When you try to criticize Anki, you can't. It's nebulous. It's intricate. It's dynamic. It's emphasized by the community. So the community is gigantic. Duo is a prescription. It's easier to criticize things that are prescribed there are one-size-fits-all attempts, and it draws criticism because it's not bad or any worse than Anki. Anki's infrastructure doesn't have a prescription. It doesn't have a standard. When you compare the nature of criticizing something, it's easier to criticize an exam that is fixed versus an exam that changes every single day on a whim. So when linguists and stuff go and criticize things, they don't talk about the psychology behind how a product appears more negative or more positive. If you write a book and it never changes, it's easier to criticize that product than a book that like a webisode of a novel that constantly change with your experience. What will happen is the current episodes will always generally feel, if that person is building skills, right, will feel more complete than the previous one. This is the difference between a live service and an open source like tool. So Minecraft, right? Minecraft versus an open world, fixed open world game. Minecraft, fixed open world game. What the developers of a fixed open world game have to do is they have to express their opinions through their games and do their design that they feel is best and leave it up for the critics. Minecraft is a tool where it's only reflective of the person that's using it. Anki is that tool. So when I tell people, how much Japanese do you know? And how motivated are you? You're very motivated. You're very brilliant. Use Anki. I don't even have to explain how to use Anki. In Duo, they're trying to not explain why it works. That's what makes it approachable. That's why it makes it still the most popular language app. It's removing explaining why it works. All the critics are the people who know why it works and why it doesn't work. So they suggest tools like Anki because you don't know why it works or why it doesn't work. You know why it works just for you. So when you pick up Anki, it will always work if you already know what works for you. Duo is providing something where the person has no idea what works for them. Like, hey, how do I approach learning Japanese? Use Anki. That's so short-sighted. I can't even begin to express how terrible that is, in my opinion, from a learning perspective. So, how do I get into being technologically literate? Use Linux. Like, what the heck? It's like, well, don't worry. All the pain, hard sweat, and high learning curve, you'll love it. You'll learn from all that. It's like, well, okay, provided that person never stops learning, right? Provided that product doesn't. It's kind of like asking someone, oh, hey, go skydiving. How do you learn to skydive? Start by skydiving. Well, there are times when they never come back. Figuratively, not literally. I'm using a literal example to illustrate the same consequences on a mental level. When you say Anki is the perfect example, and this person's like telling you already they have no idea how to study. It's been a long time since they studied. They don't know how to stay consistent. They're suffering from like mood swings and stuff. And the first thing you say is use Anki and not explain anything about what Anki doesn't do, which is it doesn't tell you how to study. It literally does not tell you how to study. It's a tool you use when you already know how to study. So you recommend Anki, and they're like, well, okay, what do I do now? I guess I'll just write some words on a flashcard and hope I remember them. And they have no other sources of inspiration. So not only is it so aggravating to me, I think it's a pet peeve of mine at this point, where someone says, oh, Duolingo started sucking, so I went to Anki because Anki is better. You only know how to use Anki because you've experienced something on Duo. In fact, a lot of things you end up putting on your Anki flashcards is the techniques that Duo introduced to you. Only now you intuitively refined on it. Oh, Duo's moving too slow. I'm going to use Anki so that it is faster at a pace I like. What do? You still do the same thing Duo does. You put a word on there, you translate it, you put emoji, you put images on there, you put voice samples. You still do that thing, but at a faster pace. And then like you use Duo, it's like, oh yeah, they don't get me to write anything really well. I don't even know Anki does writing, probably. I guess like literal writing. Like maybe it does. Like you pull up a flashcard and then you can use your finger on your phone to do the writing or something like that. Like Duo doesn't do that. It's like, okay, I'll use another tool that has that writing. It's synergistic. It's not deconstructive, like destructive. You don't learn how to better learn if you think you don't owe it to things that tells you that they don't do things, right? Like for example, in Duolingo, it's moving too slow. You find a faster thing. Duolingo doesn't teach you grammar. You find something that does teach you grammar because you realize grammar is missing. You can't know that if you haven't done Duolingo. Just like you can choose to use Python, like a programming language. We'll use programming language. I talked about this in with someone else yesterday. You use Python to get into C++, or you can just jump to C++. If you just jump into C++ and skip something else like Python, that doesn't say anything about the merits of Python. It only tells me that you do not have an appreciation for what Python does. So when someone says, oh, Duo was so slow, my first question is, how long have you used Duo? And then cut it off there. So when someone says, oh yeah, I did the first like 3 units and it was too slow, then my first inclination is when someone says, oh yeah, Duo sucks because I only used the first 3 sections. Like, well, your knowledge is only about the first 3 sections. It's too slow for you in the first 3 sections. I accept that. Do not, in a professional sense, ever overextend your experience. You do not know what the rest of Duolingo is. If alternatively, that person could read someone else's opinions and op-eds, collect their experiences on the rest, and then make an inferred judgment on that. But generally, that's where it ends. When someone says, oh yeah, this is too slow, so I use other tools. Good for you, man. Very good. You saw a problem, and it was because of Duolingo. As in, you have to thank Duolingo for existing in order to give you an idea of what pace you're learning at. And to me, when someone says they're only focused on speed, if you want my unsolicited advice, that is an incredibly one-dimensional way of learning. So I hope, in my opinion, that one-dimensional way also naturally get you to focus on other dimensions of learning. Like, I'm not worried about that person because they're motivated, even if it's just one thing, they're motivated to iterate and get better. So that's far better than someone that comes to you and say, what are your tips on using Duolingo? And my first thought is, have you used a learning program before? Or have you learned something on your own before? That would be my first question. Like, where is this person's experience? Because generally, when someone's asking how to start learning, you don't provide what is the best learning tool. You ask them, where is their learning comprehension? Because regardless of how good the tool is, to your perspective, if this person doesn't have an idea of what their learning capacity is, you start there. So when someone says, oh yeah, I have no idea how to remember things. In high school, I had trouble remembering things. It's like, let's start with there. We'll start with products that will give you an idea, as in any product that forces a philosophy. Test them out. Try them out for a week or two. And why do I recommend Duo then? For those people who have no idea where to start. That's the sentiments. And I don't even think the harshest critics for Duo can even argue against that, because that's the only thing they say Duo, they concede that Duo is useful for. I don't see that. However, at least I'm not making a hot take here. So for me, if you're asking right now, if you've never learned a second language, start with Duo. Find out when it stops giving. Write down everything that it stops giving. And find another tool to move on to. What is going to make Duo always more popular, in my opinion, the way they're doing it, is that they are the first step. That's how business works. Like, how does McDonald's work? If you discover McDonald's first, you know, like, not, this isn't true anymore, but let's just say back in the day when fast food was cheap, it's the first step on your food journey. It's the most accessible. People pick up a burger, it's like, oh yeah, now I have a baseline. Now, how do I compare everything? I want more than McDonald's. They go to a fancy restaurant. They go to somewhere else that does it better for higher cost. But the cost is now reflected in the person's experience. Anki is that. Anki, if you understand, in my opinion, if you understand logical systems, like A leads to B, leads to C, where A is quote unquote the foundations. Anything that A lacks and criticize lead to a refinement of a B product, right? Anki is later down the road, no matter what. And guess what? When you become specialized in your head, when you become more experienced and you have more expertise and stuff, genuinely, when someone is really focused on their self-improvement, anything later is often better. When you say the later products that you use is worse, that's a reflection of your own experience most of the time. You're not benefiting yourself by seeking better things, in my opinion. If you're not reviewing things and like searching for novelty, if you are working on bettering yourself, all the products later in your life cycle in the human condition will review better. In my opinion, that's psychology 101. I feel like a logic class and a psychology class is necessary. Maybe in senior year of high school or some way, because people need, in my opinion, this can help so many people on figuring out where they need to start and not necessarily be so worried about where they're going to end up. Because generally, the end is as long as you succeed, the end will always be better. Like, as you're going, will always be better than where you started. So when you're reviewing a product, why is Duolingo so much more divisive? It's the beginning of things. The beginning of things, as long as you continue doing it, the beginning things will always be more lacking than what you end up with. You are more experienced, you are more intelligent, you're self-improved. All the tools that can cater to a later stage in your learning career is going to be more comprehensive than your beginning career. So before experts come in and say, oh yeah, I want you to get to the finish line now, as in start with the finish line, that's so myopic, in my opinion. That's unfeeling, detached, and almost unjustly non-objective. Like, what I mean is, it's ironically being pushed as being objective, but it's so more hyper subjective than it is saying What are all the beginning products? Duo is a beginner's product. Please use Duo if you have no idea where to start. If you already have 2 or 3 language under your belt, do not use Duo. It is for people that are uninitiated. And that is the highlight of Duo. What does a product look like when it's about the initiated? It looks like Duo, which Anki can never look like. Anki will never be able to look like that, ever. It will cease to be Anki if they start prescribing everyone to make flashcards a certain way. Like, imagine if Anki just comes out and say, hey, we're going to become a business now. We're going to open up into the public space and have investors help us expand. The first thing it's going to do is those investors are going to implement standards that Anki has to promote. So then in the future, all your Anki flashcards will not be customizable. They will pick out the best version of everything based on statistics. What does this sound like? This sounds like Duolingo, right? Based on statistics, and all your flashcards will adhere to that standard. It'll provide consistency, consistent results. Then Anki can, the developers of Anki can go out and say, we cater to mid-level learners, and that's it. And if they communicate that, all their target audience will be satisfied with the product. That is Duolingo. All the people who criticize Duolingo is expecting it to be a product it is not. At least in my opinion. So when it comes to learning products, everything is cumulative, not destructive or deconstructive. And when someone comes in and say, oh yeah, I use Anki and LingQ now, darn straight you should be. Because if you're not a beginner, don't use Duolingo, I suppose. If you're into the fast-paced thing, absolutely. Why have I not moved on to Anki or like LingQ? That's not my interest. My interest is about the learning process. It's not about Japanese. Like, I'm relearning how to learn slowly. I'm learning things that Duo can improve. My goal is to provide commentary on what Duo doesn't do and does do in the long run. Right? Okay. What language have I learned? I only learned Japanese. Gojo. On YouTube. Only Japanese so far. It's a really long road. I will not start a new language for another 2 months. 2+ months. If not 4 more months. It will take half a year, I'm estimating, before I'm almost entirely move on from Japanese Duolingo into something else for Japanese. And even then, it will be Duolingo on the new language in Duolingo, right? In Duolingo, while continuing my Japanese education somewhere else. But Duo is not going away. It's part of the process. That's what process-oriented learning is, not end goal learning. I really dislike end goal learning. It's like, hey, look at me. I'm a polyglot. And this is the end goal. You want to come to the end goal. So everything I say is reinforced by the end goal. No, I like the process. So I'm not going to tell you that I'm focusing on what I already done in order to give credibility to the way I'm doing things. I want you to see all of those hurdles. I want you see that I'm having this digression because it breathes life into the process. It's about appreciating all the products that are given to you through the hard work and balance of other people. You are stepping on the shoulders of other people. You yourself have not created these products. So keeping that in mind makes one less entitled to pushing other people's hard work aside for your own or for another person and hiding behind righteous indignation, as in, oh, I care about you because I'm giving you advice on better products You did not create those products either. So that person extends their credibility by opportunistically using other people's products and also unemotionally and apathetically criticizing other people's products at the same time. So to me, that is legitimately, in my opinion, contrast to learning, right? This one thing that had a pill that is very difficult to swallow is a professional that says, oh yeah, you should make mistakes, like in natural conversation, so you can learn from them. And then they proceed to spend 30 minutes talking about how to avoid mistakes. And not in the sense of their capacity. They talk about, oh yeah, in language, you should make mistakes, learn naturally, get feedback from other people. And then it's like, but in language learning apps, you should avoid mistakes. You should avoid using products that don't give you the whole picture, don't give you the whole thing, and causes you to make mistakes. And then you have to learn how to fix those mistakes. I'm not offering solutions to that. I'm avoiding them. So instead of someone saying, oh, you like Duolingo, here are things you want to consider when you're using Duolingo, because Duolingo doesn't do these things. So I'll give you some advice on how to fill in the Duolingo gaps, but continue to use Duolingo. Now, as an expert, I know what Duolingo lacks. So let's add these things on. Oh, if you're 300 day streak into Duolingo, I've been there. And now let me suggest to you what you can add along the way while continuing to use Duolingo. That is constructive criticism. That is not destructive criticism. Destructive criticism is, hey, by 90 days, just drop Duolingo. Forget that it ever exists. And to me, that person who dropped it, they forgot everything that Duolingo has to offer. They will never be able to provide advice on Duolingo ever again. Because what they're going to go on to do, in my opinion, is reinforce the misconception that they didn't start with Duolingo. They rather just skip to Anki and skip to unaided, non-prescribed things. So when they go and finally offer advice to someone, they sound like an arrogant ego learner that has no attachment to where they used to be. That's kind of like saying someone got rich and they forgot their roots, right? When you got rich, you start behaving like rich people and you forgot what it's like to earn $1. Like, even if you're rags to riches, if you get caught up in the wave, you get so complacent and so comfortable with that, you forget how to relate to people who don't have anything, who are poor. That's the same process. It's a human condition. It's not bad or good. It's what humans do, in my opinion. It's one of those natural consequences that you have to be aware of. When you offer advice, don't confuse it with therapy. In my opinion, I think a lot of times when people offer advice, they lump it with therapy, as in, oh yeah, you're gonna feel bad later. Like I can imagine whoever learned language have heard this before already. Like, oh, but then you're gonna be upset. Just wait. Just trust me. You're going to feel bad, and you're going to feel like you're gonna waste your time if you continue using this product. That's gaslighting. When you're offering advice and you're not a therapist or a psychologist and you have no framework of emotional intelligence, don't, in my opinion, please be don't do it, because you need to practice, right? You need to practice it as well. So I'm not saying cut cold turkey. Be aware. I truly wish, be aware that when you're offering advice and you do not have any emotional intelligence yet, like you didn't practice that, your advice is not therapy yet. It can be therapeutic, as in when someone lacks motivation, giving advice, say, oh, you'll be motivated by using Anki. It's like, trust me, bro. When you use Anki, you'll somehow magically develop motivation. That is offering advice and overextending your experience. When you lack emotional intelligence and you're offering advice on a thing that you're successful in, you're not actually offering emotional therapy. So when you phrase things like Anki will make you feel less insecure, Anki will make you feel like you're not wasting your time, Anki will make you feel like you're sorry Anki. I actually really love the product and the idea of Anki. I just happen to be using all the buzzwords that people use, like LingQ and stuff. I'm not saying their product is bad. I think their product does something else. That's not the advice that a lot of people have come to expect. So Anki does other things. Try not to, in my opinion, project emotional things. When you're offering a product, what is the thing that most people don't like about businesses? They prey on FOMO, on fear, doubt. It's pretty much what is the abbreviation that most people say? FOB, right? Or FUMO, like what is it? Like fear, doubt, uncertainty, right? FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. FUD, right? And you're doing that, in my opinion, by being short-sighted and not emotionally available. When someone says, why use Anki? They're like, oh, trust me, you're going to feel like you're wasting your time with Duo. That's why you use Anki. Or like, you're going to find out that Duo doesn't teach you fluency. Use LingQ. Well, I'm going to be real with you. None of those tools stand alone to give you fluency. You basically used FOMO and fear, like FUD, to promote the thing that you want. And none of them stand alone. So now you got a whole bunch of communities at each other's throats when all they care about is trying to encourage people to learn. Like the bottom line is everyone still has the same goal. They want to encourage everyone to learn. And yet you have infighting. It's so distracting, in my opinion. I think the biggest distraction to education is that people are fighting each other to better educate people. That's so weird. Education is about the cumulative improvement of humans. So naturally, it's kind of exhausting, but at the same time, a very interesting topic. Super interesting. Sometimes I'm human too, right? I can be human. I'm secretly a robotic AI, by the way. I am an AI, deepfaked and all. So naturally, I don't have emotions about how noble people who want to encourage other people to learn language go around and starting fires and wildfires. Like, is your emotional intelligence that under practice that you rather start fires about learning language instead of trying to elevate language learning? Here's my hot take. Take it for what it's worth. If someone is putting down another product and they say they care about your learning, emotional intelligence would tell me, no, they don't. They care about their own ego and projecting their own ego, in my opinion, far more than caring about your well-being. A person that cares about your well-being asks questions and speak later. They have to know the situation before they actually speak about the situation. If you're trying to share your own opinions, that's a different story. When someone presents their own opinions because they say, I like Anki for these very reasons at a later stage, because I remember it was at a later stage, I hope this is helpful to you. When you get to that later stage, you're establishing all the conditions that Anki is useful. You're establishing all the conditions that LingQ is useful. That's confirmation bias, but in a constructive way. When you're saying Duo doesn't do this at a later stage, that's destructive. Because what is unsaid is everything that it does do. It's so much like science. It is incredibly and astronomically easier to say what things don't do versus what they actually offer, right? So just like that, confirmation bias is just as weak as that. So when you say Anki helped you do something, that is weaker than everything it doesn't do. It's the whole package. When you go around and say Duolingo doesn't do this, and then Anki does this, I'm so sorry, Anki. Like X product, like the better product does this, but the previous product doesn't do this. First of all, you're taking the easiest, lowest route because you're saying a product you hate doesn't do this. That's the easiest, lowest effort route because it's easy to prove that something doesn't do something versus what it does do. Okay? And then literally you did the opposite weakest approach, which is to confirm the things the product you support does, which is the easiest thing to do to confirm what you do. So not only does a person present a case that is taking the least effort to disprove something, you are also taking the least effort to prove something. How do you prove something with the most effort? You null hypothesis test. You basically treat your product like you're treating Duolingo. Ask yourself, what does a product like Anki not do? I just highlighted that. It doesn't tell you what to do. That is one of the weakest things about Anki. Duolingo tells you what to do. Okay? That is far more trying to support a product you don't like and trying to challenge a product you do like is exponentially harder and will help a person learn and evaluate things far more rigorously than succumbing to ad hominem arguments about a product you don't like and confirmation bias on a product you do like. What does a normal internet conversation look like? 80 to 90% of the time, it fills these two axioms. Either that person is supporting and trying to convince a stranger, and it works. It works. Just not on me. Most of the time, I have more questions than I have responses. But when you come to a person and you offer 80 to 90% of the time, they will tell you why they chose the product they're currently supporting with confirmation bias only, and then why you should stop using a product using ad hominem arguments. What does ad hominem arguments look like? Sometimes it can be a little bit suspicious. Like you can say, Duolingo is slow. And sometimes you can subtextually think, oh, they're actually criticizing the developers, not the product itself. Why do I say that? Well, after using Duolingo for 35 days, I know Duolingo is not slow. It is actually quite unnecessarily fast with its vocabulary. It's fast because it doesn't explain anything. It's actually really hard to slow down, as in you're constantly blitzing forward with no understanding of your things. It's actually going really fast. It's so fast that, yeah, that's what leads. It's counterintuitive. I know it's counterintuitive. Most people blame Duolingo for going too slow so you don't learn anything. It's actually going too fast so you don't learn anything because it doesn't explain anything. And now I understand where I'm so confused by people's criticisms, where they're saying, oh, I've done 600 days, but I didn't learn anything. It's like, wait, well, if you didn't learn anything, and the next complaint is that they're going really slow, how can going slow mean you didn't learn anything? So my first inclination is, well, let's test this. Like, I'm confused, so now I need to figure out why a product that is notoriously known to be slow is also notoriously known to not educate people on things. This is not a subjective take. When you slow down, humans get an opportunity to learn more. Like, what I mean is, they don't like learn less when they slow down. They learn more. You learn less when you're moving too fast. Is usually the case. I'm going to say 95% of the time. The human condition is that when you have a product that's criticized for being super slow, how do you explain that with a product that is also criticized for not helping anyone learn anything in a language? So the idea is, one hypothesis that you want to challenge is maybe they belong to two different groups of people. Maybe the slow is because people are fast, right? Are fast and competent. And then the people who are not learning anything are slower and not competent. And that's not that they're bad or good, it's they're different learners. There are two different groups of learners that are offering two different types of criticisms. So you don't slap them together, right? It's not slapping them together. That doesn't stop someone from reading an article about Duolingo and they say, oh, Duolingo is slow and it doesn't help you learn anything about language. That is oxymoronic from a learning perspective. From a psychological perspective, that legitimately is so illogical. I needed to prove it to I needed to challenge that notion. So my notion is it slow? And do I not learn anything? Right? That's the null hypothesis. I had to challenge my beliefs. I believe that when someone slows down, they are more likely to learn something. That is my hypothesis. When you need to learn something complicated, you slow down in order to learn it. So my bias is that's my hypothesis. So I have to challenge it. I have to support the idea that a product can be slow and uneducational at the same time. So after 34 days, this is absolutely nearly 95% of the time not the case. Duolingo is suffering from going too fast. It is suffering from being too streamlined, and it's not actually going too slow. The people who are going fast is likely constituting a different group of people who move on very quickly to Anki because they already have comprehension of their learning techniques. And then it's a separate group. It's more likely a separate group that is moving not fast enough for Duolingo. So they go through 60-day streaks and haven't learned significant amount of detail. I actually forced myself to slow down because I actually think Duolingo doesn't explain a lot of things. So you naturally slow down even more. And that's a symptom of going too fast. Duolingo is assuming too many things. So one of the criticisms is that I don't think Duolingo is actually as good for beginners as I initially thought it was. I actually think that it's going too fast. It's assuming that people are fast. They know patterns, they know combinations, and they naturally discover and learn all the things as long as Duolingo points to them, right? Like, hey, this is a new word. Use that, and we're going to wrap it back up to this. Like, like Lotus mentioned, he had the constant compulsion to learn on the side because Duolingo is just moving on. It's moving faster than it needs to. It's not slowing down for grammar points. It's not slowing down for new words and new combinations. It's quite literally the opposite. And I'm still, to this day, going to continue trying to see where I think people are getting this idea where it's both slow and terrible for language learning. And to me, it's like so many science interpretations, scientific journal interpretations. One science article says drinking wine is great. One article says drinking wine causes cancer. So what happens when it finally gets to the casual person? Oh, I heard drinking wine is both healthy for you and bad for you. Ta-da! Like, no, it's not. The cancer thing is a very specific case, and the health benefits of wine is another specific case. It's not cumulatively the same thing, like the same time frame. So when people go around and they lump this all together, it comes out to Duolingo doesn't do anything. It's slow. It creates bad habits. It doesn't teach you anything in language. It has no vocabulary. Holy heck. I can't even process right now. I'm trying to figure out how people got to the point where they say Duolingo doesn't teach you hiragana, it doesn't teach you katakana, and it doesn't teach you any kanji. That is literally coming out of the mouths of professionals, or so-called professionals, or so-called native speakers, or so-called successful secondary acquisition people. How do you logically get to the point where you're spewing this type of misconception that is almost illogical to happen together? Time is the factor. When did all of this happen? On one point, and groups and pre-selection groups, right? It's coming from multiple sources across multiple times. Duolingo is not all of these things to all of the people and all at the same time. People who learn slow are not going fast enough for Duolingo, so they don't learn anything. People who are going too fast are leaving Duolingo, so they don't know what it's like to be slow. Those are different times, different subsets of people. However, when you go on the internet, what do? They put it all on the list and do not qualify how they do not overlap. If you're into the Japanese language, you should, in my opinion, be really familiar with the idea of use cases in language. Duolingo is not slow, a bad habit generator, doesn't help you learn anything, preys on your FOMO and emotions all at the same time, nor is it all applicable to the prospective person. Some of that stuff will be true. Some of that stuff will be the silver lining. In fact, Duolingo will have many silver linings. However, the ego learners will remove any of that possibility. So what will you not learn? How to motivate yourself? Any form of gamification that works for you? How you respond to listening? How often you speak out loud? All these things you're never going to do. So if you avoid Duolingo, you'll never do any of them. That's just it. Let's do another social experiment. And I haven't done this yet. Compare an Anki user to someone who has used other products and an Anki user who started with Anki. Statistically, if you have enough body of data, I'm going to probably say the people who start with Anki will have far less comprehensive methods and things like inspirations and permutations of learning on Anki than those who have tried other products, because you don't have experience with other products. You don't know what other products do well and don't do. So you don't have the input of that when you're developing your own Anki flashcards. Experience is cumulative. It's not destructive, in my opinion. When you're learning, it's cumulative, not destructive, most of the time. There are very exceptional cases, of course. I don't like talking absolutes, but most of the time. So when you're going around and saying, I need to unlearn something, That is the quintessential cognitive dissonance with learning. You don't ever discard your XP. When you have a tool that's super flexible, that's fantastic. Like Anki, I would use all my tools. In fact, I will learn so slow with Anki because I will spend more time, maybe 80 to 90% of the time, making Anki flashcards than using them. And guess how I'm going to adjust my way to learning Anki? I'm not going to even use Anki for its own purpose. Here's how I will learn with Anki, and not anyone else. I'll tell you how I will learn with Anki. I will make the flashcards as detailed as I can, and I'll erase it and do it again. Every single day, I erase the flashcards, never save any of the flashcards. I would create flashcards over the lifetime of my use of Anki. Because for me, making the flashcards is the most highest effort that I see Anki as a tool. If you can make a flashcard, grab an image, do the romaji, do the kana, do the kanji, make an animation, draw something, record yourself and put it on a mic, and then add it to a flashcard, you've already done everything Anki is designed to do. It's kind of like what does Duo do? They remove all that and get you to do things. So for me, that's my hot take on Anki. If like a huge group of people want me to use Anki and demonstrate, where will I start on using Anki? I will start by just making flashcards and never using them. I'll continue making flashcards until I run out of ideas. That's it. That is my hot take. Because if you can make a great flashcard, actually, I will make the flashcards and I'll upload them. Even better, even meta than that. I will make flashcards, save them, and just upload them to Anki for anyone to use or anyone to be inspired. Because the strongest aspect of Anki that Duo can't do is community. So I will make as glorious flashcards as I can, and I'll just upload it. That's it. I will never use my own flashcards. That's it. Yeah, other apps and whatnot provide structure, whereas Anki is just flashcards, but it does depend which Anki decks though. No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. Not what I said, T. Because some are structured as courses, which are coupled with grammar, audio, and everything. Yeah, just that's not it. That's not the underlying principles. But I get what you mean. If Anki serves that to you, then that's fair. The underlying principles is the community tells you. The community provides Anki's flexibility. That's it. Not it depends. Not if you're comparing it to Duo. Anki is unstructured. That's it. There's no structure in Anki. Structure is produced by someone. So when you're talking about if it depends on someone else's structure, like if Anki, if you download something that's Anki, it's a Duo in Anki, not Anki itself. Right? Like you are downloading different Duos in Anki. When you're downloading someone's things, it's their size, it's their structure that they're providing. Anki itself is Minecraft. It's Minecraft. When you go into a Minecraft world, you are in their Duo. You are in their Minecraft world. Minecraft itself is unstructured. Besides the fundamental parts. It's like language, right? When you learn Japanese, that sentence you construct is yours. It's your sentence. Or at least you try to be your sentence. At least in English, right? Yeah, so Anki is primarily used for vocab acquisition, though not really as a tool to learn a language. That's fair. Sort of. You know, if you download the Anki course, a certain Duo course in Anki, they'll probably suggest you could learn a language from them, right? Anki alone isn't viable. Yes, everything. Yeah, it's everything. So that's kind of my digression. I wanted to commit to this digression. I was gonna save this concept for another 25 days. It's gonna reappear in a more developed way. I will tell you again all the things that Duo doesn't do, and then I'll tell you where to get them, or where to get them in yourself, because I don't use other tools. So where's that other advice coming from? My advice tends to be, where can I find that other stuff if I don't already have it? If I do have it, I will literally do those things. So Duo doesn't track all the kanji. They try to, but they miss a few kanji. I literally write them down somewhere else. Can I use Anki to do that? Yes, you can. What I'm going to do is I'm going to describe what I'm doing, and if someone knows a tool that does that, they go and use it. That is constructive. It's telling you what I do, not what I'm looking and expecting to have. That's entitlement and privilege. Is it the fastest way? No. I hope other people find faster ways. And if I don't know the answer to it, I will say what I'm looking for. So if Duo is lacking dynamic synthetic conversations, or if Duo is lacking real speakers that you can talk to, I don't know what that service looks like. So if I know Duo is not having it, my first thought is I should offer advice on where can I find other people to talk to? Where is a great place to? And I'll leave it at that. Those are the questions you should be asking yourself, right? I didn't look for the solution, but at least I can ask the correct questions, or the questions that help people look for these things. If you don't have the answer, provide appropriate questions. I don't know if I say I don't know if Duo is fast or slow, I can at least express what contributes to fast, what contributes to slow. So here I'm saying this thing, which sparked this whole digression, by the way, so let's take it back to the beginning and we can wrap this up, is that this type of design is what I would consider fast. Why is it fast? In logical systems, it's a leap of logic. They are assuming by this design so many things about the person. They're assuming the target audience is not interested in grammar points. That's what it's communicating to me. It's not interested in grammar points. It's not interested in hand holding you. Like, they're not trying to hold your hands on explaining things. Is that a good or bad thing? It's up to you. It's up to you to decide. But what this logically does is it leaps over and assumes three things. Like, at least three things that I am aware of. You are competent, and you answer your own questions if there's not information in it, right? You're competent in finding out if you can't figure it out. This is a game. Figure it out. And last one, you have no time for excess details outside of the mechanical goal of getting it right. Those are three big ones. There are a lot of like different variances on that. So this design led to everything I said in the last hour and a half. It is going too fast. When people come up to me and say, "Oh, it's too slow. You don't learn anything, and it doesn't explain anything," that's a leap of logic. When you don't stop to explain things, it's going too fast. I'm just saying. Think about it logically. Let's just think about it logically. If you have to explain something, you have to spend time explaining it. So, if you're telling me that this language program is going too slow and it doesn't explain anything, that's oxymoronic. You go slower when you have to explain something. Like that, it's not subjective here. I'm telling you now. Like, stop gaslighting me. At least unintentionally gaslighting me and telling me that this product is basically illogical to you. That I hope that you see that now, at least in my opinion, to those 6 or 7 critical like experts say this, experts say that. I hope it's fairly clear that I hope you learn all the languages in the world and you're super happy about it. And I hope you know that I'm going to learn very slowly, or however way I do, and we have mutual respect. But when you tell me something, I hope you know that the thing you're saying is incredibly illogical. And I literally gave you the benefit of the doubt and went out of my way to try to prove if that's possible, because I don't have all the experiences in the world. But I know that it will be very hard to convince me, a logical person and kind of emotionally intelligent, to say that something is both slow and not comprehensive. Okay? Or is comprehensive. Sorry, like you want something to be comprehensive and not slow is another way to say it. Or fast. Let's use positive words. You want something to be fast and comprehensive. That's usually like, oh yeah, that's cool. Like I can learn everything about a language as fast as possible. Like, okay, that's more acceptable because it's all positive, right? Now let's flip it. The product is slow and you don't learn anything. Does that track? Does that make sense? Well, no, it doesn't. It's not. It's incredibly illogical. And that's the most, in my opinion, all the critics, that's the most common. For me, personal experience, the most common so far. I was going to save this again because I need more time and more strangers to talk to me and share with me their opinions, because it matters. It does matter. I'm not saying those opinions don't matter. The idea is I need to understand why someone thinks that Duolingo is both slow and you don't learn anything. As a person who loves to teach people, that is literally going to destroy all my approaches to learning. Like I can't help people by going faster so they learn more. Like that's so often not the approach. When someone is excessively depressed and they have no way of processing, they're overwhelmed, they're insecure, their mind is racing at 8 billion miles per hour, they're tripping and they're struggling with things. The first thing you're trying to teach them is not to speed up, it's to slow down. So if you're telling me that products need to be fast and comprehensive, that is absolutely almost 99.9% incredibly illogical. So I had to ask myself, did Duolingo do the impossible? Or the highly improbable, I suppose. Highly improbable, because I don't know what that looks like yet. Did Duolingo manage to be both slow, incomprehensible, and unrewarding? 3. Both unrewarding is the third prong. Like they don't feel like they're learning anything, right? And progress is slow and it's boring. Unrewarding is the third prong. It's all 3: slow, incomprehensible, and unrewarding. These 3 things is almost like expecting a hot, cold, fire, ice in the ocean. Like I don't understand. I actually legitimately logically don't understand how that's possible. And the criticisms like this come out like it's so natural. Like, oh yeah, it's common sense now, guys. It's common sense. Duolingo is slow. It's obtrusive, it's it actually even more exaggerated. It actually is bad for you to use Duolingo because it doesn't teach you anything. It teaches you things the wrong way. That's just the rabbit hole. The rabbit hole just gets deeper and deeper. So we'll wrap it up. It's kind of a negative thing. I know it's a negative thing, and I don't try to focus. I try very hard not to be too negative. In the end of the day, all the advice on the internet about Duolingo, Anki, Babbel, LingQ, total immersion, moving to Japan, everyone wants to learn a language. And I really hope that I can end with the sentiment that language learning, much like Anki's community and how it's useful, is sometimes we want to slow down and exercise a bit of emotional intelligence. I don't necessarily think focusing on what things don't work because you disagree with them, and then focusing on things that do work because you agree with them, is naturally exercising emotional intelligence, right? So in the end of the day, I am making Duolingo work for me, not having Duolingo work me. That's a difference, in my opinion. I know that's a little subtlety in English, and we're talking about language learning, but a tool does not define me. A tool offers me avenues to improve myself. Your mileage varies based on how much you're using the tool, not the other way around. As in, and I quite literally had a very talented person who told me they are only a fast learner because they use fast tools. And to some extent, and I'm not saying it's not true, the answer is both. My answer to them when I disagreed with them is yes and no. The answer is both. You can be a fast learner, you can continue to be a fast learner and increase how fast you are, and get even faster or better with tools that are faster and better. The answer is both. I'd like to end on this digression on the concept that humans make all these tools, right? And when it comes to learning, you have access. I hope you have access to all these tools, which actually isn't true, by the way. So that's a fair argument in Duolingo's avenue when it comes to accessibility. However, all the tools you have access to, I hope there is someone in this universe, in the YouTube platform or TikTok or your favorite influencer, that the algorithm will provide you with all the possible tools, and they're not telling you not to use something, they're telling you how to use the tool. That is process-oriented thinking, not endpoint thinking. You go around and say, this tool will make you feel sad. That's endpoint thinking. How can you use Duolingo to prevent yourself from becoming sad over time? How do you use Duolingo to make up for the weaknesses or the things it just simply doesn't do by design? That is focusing on process-oriented problems or process-oriented learning. You are focused on the process of things that it lacks. So when you're looking for advice, in my opinion, it's awkward because it's advice on advice. Read the subtext. If someone is truly worried about your progress and your stuff, they would exercise emotional intelligence. So they would try to resonate with you first. Like, hey, yeah, I remember when I was like this. Like, man, getting through the foot through the door. If you're one of those person, come on, I have a couple of advice for you. That's establishing emotional intelligence first, so they're not like misleading you, as in using a blanketed statement where you assume that this person is exactly like you and then you take their advice verbatim. So they establish emotional intelligence, and then they focus on the journey of how to get to the end. They don't hustle you and tell you, this is how I became fluent in 37 languages. Just do this. That's a hustle. That's a hustle. You have no instructions. Cannot compute. It's practically a meme on YouTube now, especially YouTube Shorts, where someone says, here's a tutorial on becoming a great, chef. And then it shows a really rapid 1-minute segment. And then the first, like, most highlighted comments, like, cannot compute. I did this and now I have 4 less fingers. Right. It's actually self-aware. I feel like the YouTube comments are becoming self-aware of the internet hustle culture. So if you want someone, like, especially for Japanese, shout outs to Dogen. Like, man, that man is a workhorse. I like to consider myself a kind of workhorse, but he has a day job. He has a family too. That's incredible. I don't have a family nor a day job. So it might seem like I'm putting in a lot of time, but I also don't. Wait. Oh. oh yeah, Lotus. No worries. I thought my stream failed. People see language YouTubers say it and then just regurgitate it, or they use dual. Yeah, it's an echo chamber. Or I find that usually, yes, T. So sorry for waiting on that. I wanted to lead it into, it's an echo chamber. So echo chambers are dangerous, and dangerous in the sense that it is dangerous to someone who's not competent. So the first thing I would raise, this is where Indy should come in and say, I'm a psychology major and I want to talk about echo chambers. No, I'm just kidding. Indy is a great guy. Echo chambers. Echo chambers mean it suddenly becomes everything all at once. When you echo something enough, it accumulates all the things and it all happens at once. For example, how we got to the state where duo is all 4 things or 5 things or 7 things illogically. It can't coexist. Like that stuff just not coexist. And somehow someone could say it, and my first thought is, can you explain to me how, like, in what way is it slow, and in what way does it not teach you anything? And I don't even say that it doesn't make sense to me, because the last thing I want to do is make an ad hominem argument, right? I'm not attacking the person or their logic. I'm trying to get the person to explain it to me, and if they can explain it to me, they educate me. They explain to me something I didn't know, like that was possible. If they don't explain it to me, I would ask them questions, some more questions, and I hope in the long run, perhaps we can come to some sort of exchange of ideas where, yeah, that's absolutely absurd. Maku-san, what I said earlier was absolutely absurd. How can something be so slow that's so boring and yet I learn nothing? It is possible. There are one extraneous circumstance. You choose not to learn anything. Because if you're super bored, technically you can choose not to learn anything. But that's on you. That's on the person, not on the product. The product literally is created to give you information. You choose to absorb that information or not. When it goes slower, it is even longer time for you to absorb that information. And you spent an even longer time. If you say you didn't, the only possible way mentally, like emotionally, intelligently, I can accept this premise is that not only did you not care for the product, you're bored out of your mind, not engaged. So that's a Duolingo issue. That is actually a Duolingo issue where they focus on a lot to the detriment of comprehension. They are focused on engagement because they are still finding out that people say somehow their product is slow. Like, think about Duolingo's like feedback, like the experts that they hire. If I worked for a company, my position would probably be an advisory role, right? I would be in a place where I would disseminate and try to figure out how to interpret these comments to better the product if I were working for such a company. And my criticism is here. This is how I would partition and parse the noise. As in, how can the product I work for be both slow, incomprehensible, and boring? So, how can I speed the product up, increases engagement, all at the same time be more comprehensive? That is so off the walls difficult. I can't even imagine what it's like to be a designer at Duolingo. And that's not even true. And that's the downside. So now they're going to try to change their product. Thank goodness, I actually see that Duolingo follows their vision. I absolutely love it. Because if you don't balance outside criticism with your own objective perceptions, like how you can test this, what will happen is your product will look like an impossible mess. It will try to be fast but comprehensive, and like it's an impossibility task, and that's so difficult. Like, how do you disentangle and parse these things? You hire experts, right? You hope that you have an Q&R, like R&D department that do Q&As and follow on trends and understand psychological behavior and all that. You have lots of experts that will try to parse this. So, unlike what most people will say, my first thought is Duolingo needs to slow down. It needs to include more information. That is logical. Duolingo needs to speed up and also teach me more things. That is illogical. That is quite legitimately, almost nearly an impossibility, that you can speed something up and expect to learn more when you're already having trouble learning something at the current speed that Duolingo is designed. The way you get more information is you slow down. And the funny thing is, the people who use other tools, because Duolingo doesn't have it, they're actually slowing down. And guess what? They learn more. So they would attribute it to Duolingo not slowing down, but it is, because they slowed down, but somehow they feel like they're learning faster. Like, well, no, you're learning faster because you're doing something Duolingo isn't doing. Like, you're learning more because Duolingo literally doesn't do that. So together, using Duolingo and finding out what Duolingo doesn't do is the whole thing. You still learn as fast as, on average, most people if they have the same goals. If you don't have the same goals, then yeah, you could be learning faster in one area than another person. But if your goal is the same, if you're the same person and you decide not to go look at other things, you're actually learning faster. You're going through things faster. But if you slow down, you learn more per time. What does that look like at the end? You'll learn a subset of certain things at the same volume, and you'll learn another subset of things in the other approach. So in two parallel universes, you'll learn the same volume. It's the same volume. If you put in 14 hours of time, you put in 14 hours of time. The difference is which 14 hours of time have volume that you care about. It's not faster, in my opinion, it's likely not faster or slower. It's the volume goes up. The volume of things you value. So if Duolingo doesn't provide that volume, then clearly Duolingo is too slow, right? Because it doesn't provide you with the things you care about at a faster rate. What does that mean? What does that apply? Confirmation bias. It provides confirmation bias because the information that you want is not provided by Duolingo, and therefore the tool that is providing the information you want is faster. That's not true. If you spend 10 hours, if Duolingo provided the same content that is interesting to you, obviously this is an oversimplification. I make a disclaimer. It's oversimplified. It's similar. The rate is similar. What makes it different is Duolingo can miss more often than you choosing what's important to you. So you use Duolingo, you find out what's important to you, and when you use that time, you'll always look for things that are important to you. That's confirmation bias. You are only looking for things that interest you. So no matter what, when you spend your time to look for things that are interesting to you, it's a more efficient. Psychologically, it is more efficient use of your time. It does not mean Duolingo is doing less. It's doing about the same. Just the approach that you have doesn't offer you meaningful things. And that's what they're trying to do. Duolingo has to create designs that make it look like it is important to you. They're trying to make this stuff important to you. What does that look like? Streaks. Racing people. Showing people that you care. Showing people that get adoration from people with streaking, or learning together, or leaderboards so you see that other people are learning. That's what they're doing. They're addressing what happens if we just have a model where no matter what type of context, right, whatever type of structure we apply, we have a foundation where no matter what we give them, it will feel like it's important. It's important to you. This is important to you. We're going to teach you Klingon now. It's important to you because the foundations is telling you this is important. And that's a dangerous tool. It is a dangerous tool, and that's what video game does. So then the quality drops. You see what I mean? Like the perceived quality drops. And that's a danger. Yes, I agree. That's actually one of the trade-offs, where then soon the product is not about elevating the quality of its context because it's no longer required. It has a foundation that always convinces you it's important. Meanwhile, on the flip side, whatever you choose to learn will be more important than the thing that you're leaving away from because it's confirmation bias. Try learning something you don't want to learn on your free time, and then ask yourself, does it feel fast or slow? Generally, it will probably feel slow and less efficient compared to something you're learning that you want to learn. Human condition. Psychology 101. Understand that, in my opinion, I love learning things I don't want to learn because it keeps me in touch with understanding that the things I do learn goes fast. Not literally. Time dilation and time contraction happens also emotionally. When you play a video game, time flies when you love the video game. When you hate a video game, time dilates and makes you feel more miserable. But the time itself doesn't actually change. The volume stays the same. To me, I'm an advocate of healthy learning, and sometimes it's, okay, not even sometimes, all the time is worth going over the fundamentals of human psychology in order to make one feel happy about their own tendencies. Because when you understand this, in my opinion, if you understand these basic, like these fundamental cores of human condition, I think in general, it's my naive belief that nothing can stop you from learning anything, because you understand that feelings are involved and you care about things. So when you understand how you feel about certain things, you can overcome them, use them to your advantage, or mitigate them. So how do you convince a person who's suffering, overweight, and cannot establish a lifestyle that allows them to lose the weight and also feel happy about themselves losing the weight? It starts with these things. It starts with, and I know I choose that because it's often a trending thing, but even something trivial like learning an excess language. Get it? An excess language? So when you're trying to convince someone why learning a second language is great, you gotta start with some emotional intelligence, right? You gotta convince someone why learn something beyond English if English is mandatory everywhere. Or like, you know what I mean? Like it supersedes the function. Like 90% of the time, you can use English. That's where you start. And understanding how people overcome these challenges, like if you're able to convince something like that, that means you understand yourself just as well. Because those are the things that keep you from doing the same thing. Like if it's not a language, it's going to be starting a new diet. If it's not a language, it's going to be about coming to terms with becoming old and not being able to run anymore or being physically fit. These are the foundations of the human condition. And talking about these things when learning new things, I believe that in the end, I can get to a point with someone and they say, yeah, it's not about how hard or easy it is. It's about whether I want to do it. Not if I can't or cannot, if I want to do it. And that's kind of where this is going, right? And of course, we'll take it back to the beginning where, yeah, I really think Duo is taking a lot of liberties here. They're cutting a lot of corners, which makes them go fast. This is too fast. I like to argue that maybe I would suggest integrating like some sort of incentive, like a gamified incentive to explore something. A lot of times web apps like these, what they would do is they would offer an external link. So what could they do? They could collaborate. Duo could collaborate with Anki. You see what I mean? So like maybe they don't need the infrastructure to develop it on their own. They could use new word, click on this, and it will generate the Anki flashcard for this tip. Think about that. Of course, now you have Anki community splintering from Duo community and taking jabs at each other. But what happens if they work together? What does that look like? To me, it would be a hyperlink on here. I click on it, and it will lead to a Duolingo collaboration with Anki's set of Anki flashcards. Win-win. So now it will promote Duo community to communicate and work with Anki community to create, what does that look like in gaming terms? Mods. It will allow mod support in a direct way, official mod support on top of Duo. So when you click on new word, it will pop out and go to your Anki source, and your Anki source will load that. It's like, hey, I want to shower like this. I want to add this to my Anki if they don't have the features. The alternative is Duolingo do it all in-house. Basically, they will create their own flashcards, put their flashcards somewhere on their app, and that's kind of what they're doing right now. You know, like putting a kanji section, a hiragana section, a guidebook. Those are the things that they're trying to get closer to the flashcard system, right? That Anki would do. They can collaborate. To me, that's not happening in language learning because everyone is ego learning on their own. They're constantly picking battles and taking dumps on other people's comments and other people's methods instead of working together. It's kind of really, really distracting. It almost reminds me of those people who like constantly argue about what's the best way to teach a kid. Here's an absolute. The best way to teach a kid is the most appropriate way to teach that kid. What does that look like? You don't know until you see the kids. Much like this, when you're offering advice to learning, leave your presumptions at the door. Unless you want to tackle the criticisms that Duo has to face every day. Because they are choosing to present learning in a specific way. It's easier, or it's less strenuous on development if you create a tool that has no prescription. Because generally that becomes a Minecraft. It becomes a Roblox. It becomes a Terraria. It's less restrictive. It's unhinged. And the people that stay around are competent people. The people who aren't competent, you're not responsible for. So that's kind of like sitting in the privileged territory. I'm not going to make this too political, but when you're privileged, as in you're competent, and everyone around you is competent, then there's no problem. If you're in Japan and everyone conforms to the rules, there's no problem. All the people that get left behind, they're just ignored. Anki by design ignores that. The people who can't use Anki will not stay with Anki. So they don't stay there to complain about Anki. Duolingo enforces some type of prescription. So people will have an a response to it. They will have to experience something in order to decide to leave or not. So yes, there will be more dialogue about Duo. There'll be more criticisms about Duo, and Duo will ultimately, in my opinion, become a stronger product for its vision than something that basically has no development. In my opinion. Not in this sense, not in the learning capacity. In a tool sense, so now the developers of Anki can focus on making the tool the best thing, not politics and prescription. So if you want to slow Duolingo, if you want to slow Duolingo's development process down, that's what happens. How do you make a competitive product? You slow down. And let's just tie it all together. How do you make a product better? You slow down and listen and wait. It's so ironic that people who want comprehensive and learning and want to get the best of everything and learn a lot don't understand what patience is. Learning requires patience, even for developmental products. When you have a tool, it takes time. If you want a good tool, it still takes time, and practically more time. So how much time are you willing to wait? Well, the internet hustle culture would mean you only have time to wait for like 1 day. So guess what? You just move on to the next tool. So that's a loss for Duo. Why is Duo rushing things? It's largely because they're against a race of time. Ask yourself how patient you are. I'm patient. 35 days and I feel like it's a drop in the bucket. Alright, I gotta go to the bathroom, so I'll be right back. That's a good place to stop for the digression. Right? Keep on learning, folks.